Welcome to Adapted, the podcast where we explore adaptations of various forms. I'm today's host, Tom, and with me is...
Matt?
Today we'll be discussing Much Ado About Nothing from circa 1598-99, and the Kenneth Branagh film adaptation from 1993, and the Joss Whedon film from 2012. And just to start with another Shakespeare factoid or story or what have you, there is in the kind of scholarly tradition this debate around the artistic theater scene in England circa 1590. So in 1592, in the last year of his life, Robert Greene, who was England's first professional writer, a person who actually made his fortune writing exclusively, he published a book or a pamphlet called Greene's Grout's Worth of Wit, bound with a million repentance. And we have here one
They had terrible titles.
Yeah, oh god. Well, the worst titles are the ones that are 2 pages long, where you just have like the abbreviation. But yeah, Greene's Grout's Worth of Wit, bought with million repentance. And he, in this, the reason why this is famous at all is, first of all, he quotes a line from Henry VI, Part 3, and after that he writes, quote, "For there is an upstart crow beautifying with our feathers, that with his tiger's heart wrapped in a player's hide, supposes he is as well able to bombast out a blank verse as the best of you, and being an absolute Johannes factotum, is in his own conceit the only Shakespeare in a country." And so that's
That's
early,
witty.
very witty.
That was worth a million repentances.
Yes. But it's interesting because it's one of the earliest and one of the only critical references to Shakespeare. And it comes from one of these people.
Curmudgeon.
Yeah, basically an old angry curmudgeon. And it's an interesting scenario. So what ends up happening is at this time, or what people think is, there's this group of writers known as the university wits. It's a term that a 19th century scholar, George Shainsbury, came up with. And what they are a bunch of people who graduated from Oxford or Cambridge. And apparently Oxford or Cambridge couldn't produce enough jobs for scholars, which I'm glad they fixed that problem in the 21st century.
Yeah, there is no academic Ponzi game going on now.
Nope. That's a problem of the 16th century. But so all of these Oxford scholars, they were all the children of working people. Like Christopher Marlowe was one, whose father made boots. And so they go to Oxford or Cambridge, and it's just kind of like, well, I'm not going to make boots. I have a degree from Oxford, so I can't get a job as a scholar because there isn't any jobs. So we're going to go into the theater. And it seems like there was a bunch of actors who were kind of running theater. So theater was basically actor driven. Like it wasn't about authors or plays. It was who's the funniest actor or who's the most interesting actor. And then all of these people come in, like John
Sounds
Lilly.
very Saturday Night Live-esque.
Yeah, I think that's what I think it was, drawing from mime, pantomime, commedia dell'arte, things
Commedia
like
dell'arte
that.
kind of thing, yeah.
Yeah. And you had then a bunch of people who were trained in the classics, like John Lilly, George Peele, Greene, Christopher Marlowe, Thomas Nash, and they were modeling their work. So they started writing, and they started to try and make a sort of writer version of theater where the play was the thing. And they seem to be modeling it off of the work of somebody named Sir Thomas Sackville, the Earl of Dorset, who wrote the first blank verse play in English in 1561, Gorboduc, which it sounds like a really bad version of King Lear if you've ever read it. But that's what they were into. And that was just done for Elizabeth. It was produced twice. I think Elizabeth I saw one of it. And so they were trying to kind of take that stuffy but very properly produced play and then put that on stage and sort of take over this kind of more ribald, like you're saying, Saturday Night Live thing. And that was the thing. And they saw people like Shakespeare who didn't go to college and had, little Latin and less Greek, as Ben Jonson said, as kind of coming up and taking their jobs, and sort of like these are a bunch of dumb hicks who are basically driving out classically trained geniuses who really should be the people on stage. And it seems recently, or more recently, that view of things is being fought a little bit because we begin to see like these university people worked with the upstarts. Like Shakespeare worked with George Peele on Titus
That doesn't mean
Andronicus.
they didn't like him.
Yeah, Thomas Nash worked with Shakespeare in Henry VI Part One, it seems. So
That
maybe
might be why they didn't like them. To put it bluntly, the
yeah,
fact that they did that it's like they couldn't have theater people who work together never dislike
dislike
one
each other.
another. They always think, how could they work together if they didn't
Yeah,
get along?
yeah. So I
That would be
mean,
like, have you ever seen the end of the musical Chicago?
yeah, I suppose
It's
that
the one
that's
industry where that doesn't matter.
yeah. It's yeah, maybe it's the case they really hated each other, thought that these people needed to go away. A lot of them came out in defense of Shakespeare. They started describing him as like gentle. Like, oh, he's a gentle man. He's a very, as in, he's a good man. He's a very good man. Apparently, he's apparently a very kind guy. But it was also sort of a pejorative. It was condescending. Like these dumb hicks. They're pretty good people, though. He's a nice guy. He's easy to work with, that type of thing. But that seems to be going on at that time, and it seems like the upstarts won. So like the rubes
We are not
won.
reading Gorbachev.
Gorbadoc, yeah, I know. No one ever should. But yeah, and you see like the people who took over later. I think John Fletcher takes over as the writer for the Kingsman. I don't. I think maybe he went to college. Ben Jonson did, but he dropped out because he had to help his father lay bricks. That was his job. And I know John Webster did not go to college, it seems, or we have no record of him going to college anyway. So it seems like the next generation, there was fewer of
Wasn't he
these
feeding
people.
mice to cats in the alleyway outside? That's what Shakespeare in Love
Yeah,
taught me.
yeah. Yeah.
I mean, again, that was funny in Shakespeare in Love, but
Yeah, I don't know. Like I've read a lot of Webster. His stuff isn't quite as violent as the Duchess of Malfi, but or the rest of it isn't. But anyway, I thought that was a fun little. I was interested just in the scene, what people thought of as a writer. Apparently, there was this auteur movement in the 1590s as well. So there we go. But here we are on Much Ado About Nothing. I've read this play a few times. I've seen these films more than once. I've seen the Kenneth Branagh one a number of times.
I've seen the Kenneth Branagh one many times.
Yeah, I like that film. And I really like this play. It is not my favorite comedy, but I think it is maybe the tier below his best comedies. I think maybe his better
No,
comedies are
which ones are you putting as his best, as you like it?
I think As You Like It, and I think Twelfth Night are, and I'm not counting the romances like Tempest, Winter's
No,
Tale.
no.
So, but like I would say those are up there as his best. Twelfth Night, As You Like It. I think Midsummer as well. Um, Next level I think would be this.
I'm
Maybe
shocked you wouldn't put this on the same level, but you know.
as
What
those. I think I
well, I
think
guess let's finish. What else is on Midsummer's level? Or Much Ado's level, in your
Much
opinion?
Ado. I might put I might put Measure. I really like Measure for
I
Measure.
like Measure, yeah.
I think that's on this level. I think Measure for Measure is a more complicated circumstance and a diversity of characters. I think what makes this play so
It's also not very funny.
it's not, yeah.
Measure for
It's a
Measure
problem
is
comedy,
yeah.
right? It's
Yeah.
not very funny. This one is very funny. And I think the character of Beatrice sort of burns through this play. She really is the
Yeah.
dynamite in this thing. I don't think Measure has that character,
No, it
but it
doesn't
has a
have
more
that.
interesting circumstance. So I think that would be I think that would be roughly tier
I
two.
mean, I guess I would put tier two because I mean, again, I would put Much Ado in a higher tier, but I would put second tier comedies as like, yeah, I agree. Measure, I like As You Like It. I actually do quite like As You Like It. It's just a weird play, but I think it's got some of the best speech. It's just got some really lovely speeches, and I actually really like that one. Um, I like Merchant of Venice actually, and Taming of the Shrew. I actually think, I mean, the problem with Merchant of Venice actually would be a really fun comedy if it weren't just unperformed. It's unfathomable if you can't treat it like it was treated. It's just the way that it treats the Jew as just like the evil, like the Darth Vader figure. If you didn't have that problem, I think it would be really good. But it would still be second tier. But I would say Merchant of Venice and Taming of the Shrew, I would put in that tier too.
Yeah, I don't know about either of those as
They
on
have
this level.
massive problems. That's the problem. But I would put them on the similar level as Measure for Measure and As You Like It, in the sense that I think they're funny. I think they're good plays. I just think all of them have some element that makes them extremely difficult to produce.
Would you say there's a character in The Merchant of Venice who is as dynamic as Rosalind and As You Like It or Beatrice in this play? I
No,
think Shylock's close.
that's why I'm saying Shylock is his own. I would put Shylock, but he's not as good as Beatrice. He's not as good as Rosalind. They're in the top tier. I think they're in that number one tier. That's why I would put Much Ado and I would put As You Like It in that top tier. I would not put, no, I agree. They're not in the same tier as those ones, but I would put them in the second level. I would put something like Merchant of Venice. Yeah, I would put like Merchant of Venice, Taming of the Shrew, Measure for Measure, and As You Like It, probably all in a second tier. Really interesting plays. They got some really interesting stuff going on. I've only seen a production of Taming of the Shrew. Um, they've just got big problems in them. Not even just modernization problems. As You Like It just has a huge problem in it, and then it doesn't really make sense. The ending is doesn't make sense. Why I'm supposed to want this really lovely person to end up who is objectively a pretty awful person. I don't know why I should cheer for that. Sort of similar thing, problem for Measure. But I think those are just really interesting plays. There's so much to go into on them, so much to talk about. I just think those are good plays. But I would put all those in tier two. But I would put Much Ado still in tier one.
I think for me, I don't really care about the plots. I've sort of given up on on I don't want to say enjoying Shakespeare's plots, but finding critical defenses of them because a
It's
lot of
not
his
the
plots aren't
plots,
that
but it's the
good.
way the characters deal with their plots. Like his plots are just so contrived, but it's still fun watching these characters go try to deal with them.
No, I
Measure for Measure's
agree.
plot is complete nonsense for the most part, but it's really interesting watching those people try to deal with it.
Yeah, and I think the main female character there also shines through. And I also think her brother, he's a really interesting supporting character. The guy who's going to be sentenced to death for
One who's like, please go sleep with that
yeah.
man so you can say that. But it's a very human
It's
reaction.
a great speech because he figures it out as he's
We should just
speaking.
quickly summarize Measure for Measure. So in Measure for Measure, we're not doing that movie, but in Measure for Measure, the essential plot point is there's an interim ruler who's placed in power temporarily, and he decides that he's going to enforce an old law that says anybody who has sex outside of marriage will be executed. And so this one guy is going to be executed because he got his fiancée pregnant. And the ruler says the only way that he will spare him is if his sister sleeps with the ruler. And so she says, I can't do that. I can't give up my honor. And the brother just says, do it. You should totally sleep with him and save my life. It's not the response you think you'll get. And that's what I mean. The situation is completely contrived and stupid. But the way that brother reacts, that's really human and really interesting to see how he reacts. I think it's great. That's why I really like Measure, and I would put Measure in that second tier. I think it's really interesting. The plot is stupid. But the other, the real ruler, the real duke is wandering around pretending to be a monk. It's just like, what? This is stupid. Like,
Yeah.
this just makes no sense. But it's really, I actually the plot makes no sense. But the way that, if you would just say, fine, I'll just accept this plot for what it is, I want to see how the characters respond to it.
Yeah. Measure is worth it for Act Three. Him discovering that he doesn't know at the beginning of the speech he's going to ask her that.
No.
He just kind of thinks through what it means to be dead. And it's a very Hamlet
Yeah.
style speech where it's just, I'm going to lie in cold obstruction and to rot. And at that point, he's like, oh, Oh no, what sin you do to save a brother's life, nature forgives with a deed so far that his becomes a virtue. And it's just he like turns on a dime. So I don't think that character, or any character in Measure, is as dynamic as Rosalind, Jacques in both in As You Like It, or Beatrice in Much Ado. And I think for that reason, even though I think none of the plots of any of these plays really make any sense, in terms of character, if I rank it by character, I think As You Like It kind of takes it. Um, and Midsummer as
I
well. I
still
mean,
like Beatrice more, but I
okay.
can appreciate Rosalind. I like Beatrice more. That's maybe it's just I really like Beatrice. I really like Beatrice, and maybe that's why I put it in this top tier. I think I'm in love with Beatrice. Like
Yeah.
I just
It makes sense. Yeah.
I just love Beatrice. I think she is so wonderful. Just and maybe it's also Emma Thompson. Maybe I'm just in love with Emma Thompson. Like I just think that role is so good, and it's just that character is so good.
Yeah, she is somebody you fall in love with, and she is the smartest person in any circumstance. She's really funny, but she's also really fun. She's
Yeah,
not a scold at all. And
no,
when she tells off Benedict, it's not a dismissal of the good life. It's just a dismissal because he's kind of
it's
a dope.
dismissal of him.
Yeah,
She
he's a
just
dope.
doesn't like him.
And there was at one point a suggestion that he might have led her on. And we
Yeah,
see that in
that
Act
you were. Yeah,
Two.
I know you of old. You always end with Jade's trick.
Hmm.
Yeah, I know you
Yeah.
of old.
Yeah. And there's actually two references. I think that's in Act One, and then later in Act Two, she also mentions that I gave my heart to him and we
Yeah,
were two hearts
yeah,
for
that's true. Yeah, I forgot about that one.
and
Yeah,
so there's this like backstory there, and so some kind of justification, but even more than that, you just get the sense that this man is not good enough for her.
no,
That's the problem. He's not good enough for her, and the fact that he would dismiss the potential for any kind of relationship with any woman is so stupid to her because who the hell would he deserve that he's going to go around going, like I'm like, oh no, not me. I'm never going to get married. Women love me. Every woman loves me but you. It's like, oh, shut up. Shut up. Shut up. And she just tears him down. And yeah, she is an easy person to fall in love with. And she when they fall in love with each other, and they do pretty easily, which is what happens in Shakespeare comedies, she doesn't lose any of that
no.
vivacity. She's still, and she's very much like Juliet. In Juliet's a little different. Juliet's softer than Beatrice. You get Juliet is actually literally younger than Beatrice, and that
Juliet has
shows.
some lovely edge though. Like she does get some barbs in periodically, especially at like the nurse or something. You know, like she's got some good forcefulness there. She's got some tastes of wit about her.
Yeah, but with Beatrice, when they turn to love, she doesn't lose any of that edge at all. It informs that relationship, and this is something that happens in Shakespeare. It happens in Rosalind, happens at Juliet. Rosalind in As You Like It with Orlando. It happens with Juliet in Romeo and Juliet when she's dealing with Romeo, and it happens here where you have these incredible women who have to sort of train the men they're with
Yeah,
to live up to it. It's literally the plot of As You Like It. He says, Orlando comes
yeah.
to her and says, train me to fall effectively to fall in love with you. It is essentially the plot in Romeo and Juliet, where she had to sort of tell him how to woo and how to deal with this. And once she realizes that this man is worth something, if she could deal with him, it's what's happening here as well. And
I also think, I mean, I don't know, but I think there's something else going on, and I feel like maybe again, this is just me. I like to think of Shakespeare as being like you can actually piece these things together, and so you know what? I have my head canon, and I'm going with it. I think that this is almost like his apology. This is his apology for Taming of the Shrew. This is his attempt to sort of be like it's his apology to Kate because I don't. I do, and I know we're going to we'll do Taming of the Shrew later, but I just feel like this is sort of his. I don't think in Taming of the Shrew you're meant to get to the end of that play and think, good, I'm glad that what happened to Kate happened. I don't think you're meant. I don't think that's what you're meant to get out of it. And I think this is his sort of. his apology for people who thought that that was the point. And there's this sense, and there's a number, and then part of it is just based textually because there's a number of references where you say you talk too shrewdly, you're too shrewd, and they kind of seem to emphasize the word shrewd a lot. There's a number of characters who call her shrewd. I'm like, that can't be accidental. It just feels like what they're doing is saying, because that is sort of what Kate is. That's basically what Kate is at the beginning of Taming of the Shrew. She's essentially Beatrice with a little more venom, but more or less she's this very similar kind of thing. And I think this was Shakespeare's attempt to go and say, like, I'm really sorry. That character did not, that character in that play did not come out the way that I wanted it to. And this is my attempt to give her her own voice and her own play in which she can sort of shine. It reminds me in some ways of D.W. Griffith when he did, uh,
Oh, intolerance.
yeah, Intolerance, when he does, which, he does Birth of a Nation and everyone comes out and says you are racist, and I don't think T.W. Griffith was trying to be like, I mean, I'm not celebrating the KKK. That isn't quite the point, but I don't think he was quite trying to be like they were great and we should do what they did. I don't think that's what he's doing, and I think that's why he's coming out being like, I'm not racist. Like, I'm gonna make another movie, and it makes sort of a not great movie, but he makes another movie in which he kind of tries to apologize for that aspect of it. And I think something similar is happening here, where I just think he made Taming of the Shrew. A lot of people, because I think even contemporaries had somewhat of an issue with Taming of the Shrew. I think it went, I think they kind of saw that and went, this is a bit much. And I think he sort of was being accused of something. I think he came out and said, I'm going to make a character, the same character, and she's going to be the star. She's going to shine here. I feel like that's something like that is going on with Beatrice.
I could see that. Certainly that seems certainly defensible to me because every
Prove
female.
me wrong, English professors. Prove me wrong.
No, I think that's defensible, absolutely, because the female characters in the comedies after that tend to be the more grounded characters. If you have a female with a male of the same age and they're paired off, since Taming of the Shrew, it seems to be the female's more grounded, unless I'm wrong about that. Or you could think of an example.
Not, I mean, other than the subplots, like
In
obviously someone like Phoebe is
is a
completely
little,
off the wall,
yeah,
but that's meant to be, but yeah, the main female characters in Shakespeare comedies tends to be the best characters. Those are often the best roles, other than, sometimes the tragedies have a great role, like Lady Macbeth or something, but some of the best Shakespeare female roles are in the comedies.
yeah. Yeah, and it tends to be because they're smarter than everybody else. It tends to
Yeah.
be a function of their intelligence, not their goofiness or something like that.
Yeah, and they have to, as you said, they have to actually train the men to actually do. I mean, it's a very common trope of even modern comedies. Think of like As Good as It Gets. It's like the '90s classic romantic comedy where you're essentially going and saying like the woman has to kind of train the man on how to be a good boyfriend. Like that's essentially the main idea behind that. But a lot of romantic comedies have that idea that the man's an idiot and he needs the woman to help train him. A lot of them do this in sort of a much less interesting way than Shakespeare does it, but this is a long trend going back for a very long time.
Yeah, and other romantic comedies, the it happened one night, it has the man training the woman, but the
But
idea,
she's also training him. I mean,
and
she
she's
has to
also
also, yeah,
training him. Yeah, he has to learn
it's
not to be
mutual there.
he has to learn not to be prejudiced, and she has to learn to act like a not a millionaire, right? Learn how to deal with struggle or whatnot. I mean, see our episode on It Happened One Night a few seasons ago. But this seems to be, yeah, the origin of kind of those romantic comedies. And you're right, there is this aspect of training that's going on that really starts with two people disliking each other. And over time, they figure out they can be compatible if they can adjust in certain ways. I mean, Jane Austen even has that. I mean, that's a big aspect of
Yep.
Pride and
There's
Prejudice
a big aspect of
is
Pride. Yeah, that's essentially Pride. Sense and Sensibility doesn't really have that, but Pride and Prejudice does.
yeah, so it's less so there in that, but Pride and Prejudice
It's
um,
absolutely that. Yeah.
is it's absolutely that. And Darcy has to learn a little bit about the family. He has to kind of get over that, and she is misinterprets him. She
I just
misreads
love
him.
Darcy. And even as you say it, I'm laughing because I love Darcy's proposal. What a good, what a good
Yeah.
proposal.
Yeah, he has to learn not to be, he's an ass there, and he has to
Yeah.
learn not to be an ass. Yeah, when he, yeah, see our episode on Pride and Prejudice. We've done everything on this show to see what we're talking about. But that seems to be starting here. And I think in not only in Shakespeare, but it seems like this play specifically feels like the beginning of romantic comedy.
Yeah.
And I don't know if there's a romantic comedy before this that he's modeling it off, but this idea of two people disagreeing with each other, and maybe Taming of the Shrew's earlier, maybe Taming of the Shrew, but I don't think that really
I don't think, but
can
Taming of the Shrew, and again,
persist.
I don't think, but Taming of the Shrew isn't. I'm going to convince my wife to love me. This was, I'm going to convince my wife to obey me.
Yeah,
It's just,
it's
it
pretty,
has
pretty
a,
plain. That's what he's doing. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and so it's maybe, I mean, it's there, but maybe he's taking, maybe that was the, that's sort of just, that almost has this sort of Chaucery kind of
Hmm.
feel, this sort of just fable-y, sort of
Hmm.
fake, everyone knows it's not real, but we're gonna laugh at this situation anyway. Like, that's kind of what Taming of the Shrew feels
That
like.
well, it's Wife of Bath. Taming of
Yeah,
the Shrew is an inheritor of Wife of Bath. Wife of Bath has five husbands in Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, and it's
so I'm
all
not wrong.
about.
It is Chaucery. Okay,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
I do feel I
I
feel
agree.
justified in this. Okay.
I think it's entirely true. And the Wife of Bath's prologue, it's all about how she broke her five husbands, how she just made them obey until they died. That was
I
her.
actually wouldn't have made that link, but you're right. That
Yeah,
is actually probably what I was thinking in my
that
head.
is what she, and she says it expressly. She says the point is to make them obey. And her last husband, um, basically, she like pisses him off so much that he throws something at her and she pretends to be really hurt. But she pretends to be so hurt and he's so devastated and she just tells the audience, she's like, then I had him. He had to obey me from there on out because he thought he beat me up or beat me up nearly to death. And now he has to obey me. And yeah, that's what's going on in Taming of the Shrew, just
Yeah, so
the
it's
other way
in
around.
that, and that's a tale, that sort of has a fairy tale-esque feel to it. No one actually thinks this is how the world works, although the Wife of Bath story seems a bit more realistic. But there is this sort of feel to it that this is sort of a tale. This is what every Hallmark movie is. This is what the You've Got Mail was. These are all that kind of story where they think they hate each other and then they learn that actually their hate isn't hate, it's just an expression of their love, whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah, this is the origin of that. And it's really fun. It's really fun. Some of it doesn't work.
So why would you not put it in the top tier of comedies? Like, before we move on to the movies, why would you
Maybe
not put it in the top
sure.
tier?
Let you. Why not? I think what it is at least with As You Like. So I think Rosalind is a little. I think Rosalind is a good competitor with Beatrice. I don't know who's the better character. I think that question might even be a little silly. But I think what happens with As You Like It is the other characters are they're not as interesting as Rosalind, but a lot of them are pretty compelling. I think Jaques is really compelling, and I don't think there's anybody in Much Ado About Nothing besides Beatrice who is as
Benedict
compelling.
is interesting. Benedict is interesting.
Benedict is he's a foil for her. I don't think he's interesting in and of himself. I think Jaques is interesting in and of himself. I think his kind of melancholy.
Yeah, I mean, I would have to disagree a little bit. I agree. Jacques is interesting in and of itself. We haven't done that one yet, but I think Benedict has his qualities in that he's not Falstaffian, but there's this sense that everyone just sort of goes to him when they're like, there's even when Don Pedro and Claudio they're like, we need to be entertained. We want someone to uplift us. Benedict, you entertain us. Like, he almost has this quality where you can imagine if he remained a bachelor, he'd end up like the fool in Lear. Like, he has this quality of, I'm
He's not
not
that
saying,
smart.
but people think he's funny. Like, people laugh at him. He puts these jokes forward. Like, I think if he gains his experience, he becomes a fool. That's sort of, I think, the idea. That's how I kind of see it as. If he once he's gained 20 years of experience and he's learned what it is to be what he is, he'll be a fool, and he'll be Dom Pedro's fool. That's kind of that's what I think that sort of is going on here. Is he's a fool in training, and he's sort of short circuits that because she comes and picks him up and pulls him with her. But there's this sense that he is funny, he's witty. Some of his lines are funny. Like he's witty, and when he's trying to deal with her, like he is they're equals in the sense of their wits can bounce off of one another. He's not as funny when she's not there, but he's still pretty good. He's still pretty funny. He's still pretty witty. And maybe he is just a foil, but I think there's a little more going on than, yeah. I mean, come on, Orlando. You're going to try to say Orlando is an interesting
No, I
character?
don't think Orlando is, but I think even like Phoebe and the Shepherd, that's a more interesting circumstance than Claudio and Hero. Claudio and Hero are pretty dull, and I think the stuff with yeah, I think As You Like It has a kind of sort of bubbling diversity in it of
True.
people, and I think this one, it's it's one mountain peak, and it's Beatrice, and I could see where you're coming from with Benedict. Maybe I'm giving him not enough credit. But I'm not going to.
I'm going to say that what I see what you're saying, but you're still
I don't
wrong.
well, I don't think you're wrong. Maybe it's just an issue of taste. But that's the only thing there. Another thing I will say, I don't think the Dogberry stuff works very well.
No, but
It's, I don't I think that's like a bit of a miss in terms of his comedy. But like, I mean, how many times is he going to say, "Let the record show I am an ass"? I mean, he makes that joke like six times, and it's
yeah, but
mm,
Simpsons have shown us if you just keep saying the same joke over and over, it becomes funny.
yeah, that's true. But that being said, I'm not looking to tear this play down. I think this is a wonderful play. I do like how they fight, and you're right. Benedict can get the best of her. Like she says, you end everything with a jade trick. Like he
Well,
is the
because but
one.
they all show that he's cheats essentially. Like he does the I'm going to insult you and then say, but I'm not going to talk to you anymore. He's not going to let her come back, and it's like you cheated. I could have, and then you walked away and you made everyone laugh and then you pretended like you were being magnanimous. Like that's I think the point there is that it's like you cheated. I would have still got the better of you, but you manipulated it and you walked away from it, and that's cheap. That's what I kind of, which I think both plays make that, both persons of the movie make that
Yeah,
clear.
me.
But he does. I mean, he continually makes insults at her, and he does. They generally are able to keep pace with one another. He's not quite at her level, but he keeps pace.
He keeps pace with her, yeah. I think the point where she dominates him is when she gets him to duel with Claudio. She dominates him in that scene.
Yeah, I would agree.
And I don't think he has any interest whatsoever in fighting with Claudio. I think he probably doesn't think Claudio acted well. And we should maybe tell the audience, Claudio is the second male lead. He's supposed to marry Hero, the second female lead, but it is suspected that Hero has cheated on him with someone. And so during the marriage ceremony, he rejects Hero, he castigates her, she's humiliated, and then her father and her uncle set up a trick where she's supposed to have died in order to make Claudio feel bad. And Beatrice
That
wants,
plot makes no sense, by the way. It totally makes no sense. And it
yeah,
seems to have no bearing whatsoever on the play. This is where I agree. The play maybe isn't the best made thing. That whole sequence makes no sense. Like, why did they do that? What effect did it have?
I suppose the idea would be, is he repented enough to do something like,
But he doesn't. He doesn't care. He literally, once he finds out she's dead, and he's like, "Oh yeah, that's a shame, but I'm still right." It's his response.
but when but then when he finds out that actually was false,
But they don't know that yet. Like I
he,
think even if
he
they
knows
don't,
that. Claudio knows that when he
but no
goes
one
to,
else knows that it's really false. They're basically
yeah,
just like
Leonardo knows.
he thinks that it's true. Like I think the thing is they're like, well, we're gonna try to purify her because she says that she's honest. So we'll fake the death, and then he'll feel so bad because they don't know that they're going to be able to prove that she's not That's literally basically what the friar says is they don't know that they'll ever be able to prove that she was maligned. So it's like, no, we'll fake the death and he'll feel so bad at having killed you that then he'll repent having accused you. And he doesn't until it's proved that he's wrong, which he would have done anyway. Even if she hadn't died and he'd been proved that he was wrong, he would have felt bad about it. So their goal of we're going to make him feel bad about it because you died at his accusation accomplishes nothing.
Oh, that's a good point. I always, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, if you just make it that the accusation comes and then the death is feigned, that would make sense
Yeah, but
because then everybody has that information. Yeah. Huh.
but no one knows that she's so it's sort of like, well, if let's put it this way, like if they never had figured out the truth, then it wouldn't have mattered. Faking the death accomplished nothing. Like if the truth about that Don John had set her up and she hadn't actually cheated on him, then and they hadn't figured that out, then the faking of the death would have accomplished nothing. It didn't accomplish anything, right? They would have left
Yeah.
and it would have done nothing. And if once they find out the truth about Don John having set up the situation, then they say, "Oh, then I feel so bad and I have to go back to her now." Which, if they hadn't faked the death, they would have just gone back to her. So the faking of the death doesn't accomplish anything except to raise the stakes
Yeah, and it's not raised for us because we know she's
because we know
alive.
she's
Yeah.
alive. So it's
It
just
would
sort of
it
like,
would make sense. Yeah, you're right. You're right. It would make sense if once he finds out that it was a trap set by Don John, then they say she died. And so then the idea could be, oh, he needs to go through this penance
yeah,
for too quickly accusing her. And I guess the defense that you could make is they say she died in order to make him feel guilty, and it doesn't work. Like, oh, and then they find out the truth, and then it does work.
it
But
does work. And
but
now he
that's
has to suffer.
yeah, that's kind
I
of
guess this
weak
is I
sauce. Yeah.
yeah, I'm like it's pretty weak. This is I don't know whether this is accurate. This is again another one of my sort of head canons. I would love for this to be true, but again, there's no way I don't think anyone could ever prove it. So I think a number of Shakespeare comedies do this. They sort of set up we set up the potential for tragedy and so you could have this situation turn into Romeo and Juliet situation, right? If he thinks that she's dead and then he's so upset that she's once he finds out that he had maligned her that he suddenly instead of accepting the penance he runs off and kills himself. This is, and then she's so upset that he killed himself that then she kills herself, and then the whole thing, this is essentially what happens with Romeo and Juliet. So the comedies always have the potential for tragedy in them and they subvert them. Something happens that sort of is like, no, we're going to just twist the circumstances just right that it actually slides through. And I've always wondered, is that what the audience now this doesn't work if you've got the prologue at the beginning of Romeo and Juliet. So that's why I say like was that added later? Is that if you were to watch Romeo and Juliet, could you think that this was going to play out that way? That oh, it's all they're this is a comedy, and we're almost at the point where everything is going to work out, or it's going to be go terribly, but the circumstances all line up and everything is fine. And so, could the audience, when they saw Romeo and Juliet, have thought they were getting Much Ado About Nothing, and then got to the end and gone, "Oh my God, they're all dying." Like this is not what we thought we were getting. And there's almost this sort of like bait and switch that happened in that play. I don't think that's what's
Maybe
going on, but that would make Romeo and Juliet a really great play.
that would be the problem is the titles of the plays tend to be the tragical history of Romeo and Juliet.
Well,
It's,
that's the question, but
yeah,
do we have any of the original advertisements from Romeo and Juliet?
for them, no, I don't think so.
I
I
would
think we just have
love to
the books.
Yeah, I would just love to know that if that would make Romeo and Juliet one of those really great plays. It would make it like Ibsen's Dollhouse, where everybody thought at the end of Dollhouse that they knew what was going to happen, and then suddenly Nora walks out. I don't think the original audience thought that was going to happen. And there's almost this sense here of did people think when they saw Romeo and Juliet they were going to get a comedy, and then they went, "Oh no." This is not at all. And then it was like, okay, we gotta put a prologue at the beginning of this thing because everyone got really upset when
But
we
you've had
just
a bunch of characters die. That's the only
yeah.
problem there. You have
Winter's Tale has
Mercutio.
people die. Duke gets eaten by a bear.
Yeah. Yeah, he does. But Winter's Tale, I think maybe I would say I think Winter's Tale and it was probably the play that would subvert expectations more because I think
Yeah,
you
I know. I'm
probably
not saying it actually works, but I'm saying it would be really great if
that
it
would be
did.
yeah. It's a really cool idea. Did they not? It's a really good question too. Did they not know the genre going into it?
Yeah. If
My
you didn't know, you could see this as being like a dark comedy where like the stakes are really being raised, but they're gonna be fine in the end. And then you're like, imagine if you didn't know that Romeo and Juliet, you
uh,
thought you
mm,
knew what Romeo and Juliet was. You thought it was a comedy. Read Romeo and Juliet. Think, and as you read it, think that like, oh, it's gonna end up like Much Ado.
mm.
They're gonna just end up together in the end, and they're gonna run off from the tomb, and and it's gonna end up fine, and then get to that ending and go, wow, that is a very different. That's a very different play.
There is a movie that does this. It's called Audition, and I'm going to spoil the movie Audition. So, Pat,
I'm not gonna watch it.
and an audience, it's a Japanese horror movie, so skip ahead a minute if you don't want to be spoiled. But it's a romantic comedy where like this woman is like her son can't get a date, and so she sets up auditions so that different women can come and audition as a date, and they don't. He doesn't know it's an audition, and I think the women do. And so it's this like kind of rompy thing, and there's like one woman who's a little weird, but they start to get along, and blah 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 at the audition, and then at the very end of the movie, she knocks him unconscious and tortures him to death because actually she's a psychopath and has been using the audition framework in order to do torture porn on the guy. And that's how the movie ends. So I
Ah, the Japanese.
yeah. I don't know if that would be a great way of dealing with Romeo and Juliet, but I see your point.
I
Um,
just think it would be fascinating if you.
yeah.
And the thing is, you can't do it because everybody knows the play so well. You would literally have to find someone who has no idea what this thing is,
Well, they used to do things like
get them
this.
to think that it's a comedy going in, and then just watch their reaction when they see the ending.
Well, there's a very famous version of King Lear from the 18th century where it's has a happy ending. They changed the ending so it ends up being a happy ending. So I can imagine going into the theater and I can't remember the name of the author now. I remember going into the theater and being like, oh, she's is they're fine. His daughter's fine. She didn't die. Oh no, she's breathing again. And oh, he's king again. Oh, all right. I guess it all worked out very well. So they did this in the 18th century. They would change the ending of Shakespeare. They do this with The Tempest too, where they just add a bunch of characters for some reason. What's his name? Caliban's mom, isn't it? They make her a character in it, and the daughter. What's her? Prospero's daughter. I can't remember her name. She has a brother.
Miranda?
Miranda, yes.
Yeah.
Very good. And she has a brother. Just suddenly, that
Or
character.
for a second, I thought you said she does her brother. I'm like, gosh, I don't remember I don't remember his name at all.
Yeah, no, she has a brother. So maybe we'll look for the 18th century for the happy Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah.
But
But
anyway,
anyway, I just so we
Prince,
should we should move on to the
move it to the
movies. Move on
movies.
to the
Yeah.
movies.
Um, I really, really enjoy this movie quite a lot. I read Harold Bloom mentioned hating it, and his reason was he thought
Well,
that
he's wrong.
yeah, his justification is that it's the Tuscan countryside. So this movie was filmed, even though it takes place in Messina, it was filmed in Tuscany. The Tuscan countryside distracts from Shakespeare's verse.
Wow, that's an odd complaint.
It's a very, very weird complaint. I think this is
I
one
think
of
that might
the
have just been you, Harold. No one else.
yeah
No one else was looking at
was
the
worried
Tuscan
about
countryside.
being like I can't hear the Shakespearean verse. There's too much
There's
Tuscany
too,
here.
there's too, yeah.
There's too many olive trees. But I think this is one of the happiest, like, rich with life movies I've ever seen. It's not
It's just
ironic at all.
joyful. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
just joyful. There's no irony. This is just, isn't this a good play? Like,
yeah,
this isn't
mhm,
isn't this great? That's all it is.
yeah. Yeah, everybody looks great. There's a lot of like parallel walking where people are in perfect parallel forms as they're walking out, and as the women meet the men in the beginning. You see people, like bathing in group as they're getting ready. You feel how excited these people must be to come back from war and basically try and date a bunch of women, and a bunch of women like hanging out and waiting for the soldiers to come home from a war which doesn't even feel like it was a real war, right? It feels like it doesn't feel like these people were covered in blood, a week
Well, that was
ago.
one of the worst productions I ever saw of this, and it wasn't a great production anyway. And I don't think anybody was particularly strong in it. I saw a production in London that starred James Earl Jones as Benedict and Vanessa Redgrave as Beatrice. Now, they must have both been in their 80s. So that's strange. And they set it after World War One, which also sort of adds to the strangeness when they're like, we lost no men, very
Few
few
of
men, and
note.
none of name. And I'm like, I mean, this doesn't work. This doesn't work. And they had tried to make it during the masquerade, like throughout the whole thing, they keep having like the Grim Reaper and like death is like always hanging over them. And I think they were trying to do a sort of jazz age post, 1920s sad much to do. I'm like, that's just not what this play is. This play is not that. It's not sad. You can't have it be old. This is about young people loving life and peopling the world. This is that's what this is. It's just an absolute joy about life and love. That's what I think it is. And so that production didn't work. And I think Branagh captures that sense of it. Now there is a darker sense to it that Whedon's one gets to, and we'll get to in a minute. But this one just it loves this play. It loves Shakespeare. It loves life. All these characters. Everyone is just loved.
Yeah, and the cast mostly works really well, especially the two leads, Emma
Yes,
Thompson and Kenneth Branagh. And we should mention they were married at this point. I believe they were married or
they
going to
were.
be
Yeah, no,
married.
they were married. They were
They were
married.
married at this point. Yeah, so they're actually a couple, and she's phenomenal in this role.
Yeah,
She absolutely is.
she's so good.
Yeah, she's like sexy, but she's very funny. She is really mastered the verse. That's the thing. Both of them are so good with the verse.
They're so good at it. They're
Yeah,
absolute masters at it.
yeah, they have beautiful
Everything is
speaking
great. Yeah.
voices. So, when you
The
hear,
world must be people. Like this, the way every line comes through. So many of them are just they're funny and they're stunning and they're beautiful. And Emma Thompson has the moments where she gets to have like just beautiful lines. The when she talks about nay, when they say you were born under a merry star, and she says nay, my mother cried, but then and then a star danced, and under that was I born. Just those lines. They're beautiful. They're absolutely beautiful, and she is a just amazingly beautiful woman and beautiful actress in this. It's so good. It's so good.
yeah, yeah, and he gets kind of the goofiness of Benedict, but he is somebody who is solid enough that you could follow him. And the scenes where they really are going close to over the top don't feel false. There's a scene where
No,
they finally discover they love each other. Or they think the other one loves them, and then they feel love for the other one. And you see her on a swing, and it's superimposed on him running through a fountain and kicking the water in a fountain. And describing it, it sounds corny, but it's
just works.
really fun. It's really like, yes, that is the level of emotion we have been brought to at this point. Yeah, you are running through it. You feel it like, yes, of course you would run through a fountain kicking water. You're in
Of
the most
course, you'll swing on a swing in your white gown as it flows in the
but
wind.
you've just discovered the most beautiful woman in the world is in love with you, and your labor of war is over, and you're in the most beautiful place in the world, and you have no worries. Why not go dance in a fountain? Why the hell not? It just all works. And the other cast, there's I think problems here. But the ones that really look like Richard Breers as Leonato.
He's great. You don't
He,
like him?
oh, I like him a lot.
Oh, I was like, I
Oh,
really
I was
like him.
saying
I think he's
there's,
really good.
yeah, I was gonna say there's things in the cast that don't work, but the
He's
people who
really good.
do
I
work,
actually
yeah,
really like him.
yeah, I like him a lot. Um,
You didn't like Denzel Washington. I like Denzel Washington, but
I think what it is with him is with Breers and with Emma Thompson and with Branagh, their vocal work is so good. And I think there's something, you mentioned this to me off air. There's something with American actors where they're, even if they do the verse correctly, they don't necessarily have that kind of dexterity of speech. There's something more about that sort of,
we don't have the same we can't Americans struggle, I think our vocal range doesn't do we if we change our vocal ranges dramatically, we sound psychotic.
yeah.
Like we do.
Mm,
Whereas the if I suddenly started talking like this, if I suddenly raise my register
mm,
or radically lower my register, it'll just sound weird. Whereas I don't know, having lived in London for a little while, the British accent can really get up there, and then oh man, no, you can't do that.
mm.
Like they can really move their vocal register, and obviously those were terrible accents. I'm sorry for all of our British listeners, but just the way the accent works, it has more flexibility. You can move it way up, you can move it way down, you can throw your voice around in ways that we can't. Where if
Mm.
I do that, I'll sound psychotic.
And I think the acting training in the different countries reflects that. We're very much into this sort of method infused, grounded, objective based, nothing aesthetically external. Right? Everything has to come from the internal. And
Yeah.
the British are much more, first of all, they pretend not to be trained. Like, that's a big thing, pretending you haven't gone to school for acting, even though you've gone to school for acting. I don't know why that is in England, but it's also grounded in the, especially with Shakespeare, in this kind of external requirements that Shakespeare places on you, which is how to use the text, and as you're saying, to move up and down the register. You're kind of using your voice as an instrument, while in this, it's the quality of your voice. If it's too affected when you're an American, it means you're thinking externally and not internally, and that's bad and wrong, and we don't like that. And so I think maybe that was why I bucked a little bit with Denzel Washington, because he's doing this high, like a little bit of a higher voice than he normally
Yeah, he's moved
has.
his register. His register is up.
Yeah.
He is not in standard Denzel register. It's definitely will will you marry me, lady? Like it's not a it's and he doesn't do the British accent, but it's almost as if he's trying to not do a British accent.
Yeah.
And so he's in a higher register than he normally would be.
Mhm.
I just didn't mind it. I actually I thought it was an okay performance. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe I'm being too harsh on that.
I think it's just, I mean, again, I guess it's I think that what Branagh's doing here, and when we do his Hamlet, I think he's got some castings there that do this too. I feel like Branagh is trying to do something with this. He doesn't do this with Henry V, but he's trying to do that with Much Ado, and I think he's very consciously trying to do it with Hamlet. That he's trying to go and say like Shakespeare isn't just for the British. We can have, Americans can do it too, and people who aren't trained as British actors can do it, or Shakespearean actors can do it too. And I think he's trying to very self-consciously. Now, this is the artistic side where I think he is. I think the cynical side would say, no, he wants Denzel Washington and Keanu Reeves because they're famous and they'll sell tickets. And I don't think that's actually, but maybe that's there. But I do think that he's trying to say, no, it's okay for Americans to perform this. It's okay to do this without a British accent. You too can do Shakespeare. I feel like he's that's what he's I don't know. I think
He's
he's
taking the
trying to do that.
stuff out of it. He's taking the stuff, like the kind of, I think Shakespeare for a lot of Americans, maybe a lot of other people too, think of Shakespeare as sort of stuffed, like it's
Yeah.
proper and it's something you do in tights or something like that. And I think you're right. think that is a nice and probably correct image of what Brown is trying to do, which is bring in these Americans we all love and say, look, this is accessible. Your guy that you follow, that you love, whose movies you go to, your action hero, he's doing Shakespeare also. So yeah, there it is. Um, and that works a lot of the time. I think it works a lot in Hamlet that
I
he
just think
does.
it's fine. I mean, I'm more charitable towards Denzel. I'm not although I do think it might be Branagh's fault. I'm not as charitable towards Keanu Reeves and Batman. I'm
Oh
just
God, yeah, yeah. I really struggled with Michael Keaton even
yeah, Michael
more.
Keaton. Yeah,
Yeah, should we go into a little bit of those problems? I would say Keanu Reeves this time around, I think he bothered me less because he's just not in it that much. He has two scenes, and then he has this weird laughing scene where he runs through an underground corridor and laughs.
I blame Branagh. I think it's Branagh's fault because I think what Branagh wanted to do was he wanted the character of Don John to be radically opposed to sort of the joyful, boisterous fun. And so instead of letting Don John be essentially a cartoon villain, which is kind of what he is, he's essentially the like, some people just want to watch the world burn. Like he's essentially like the Joker. He has no real grounding. He just wants to break things. And so he's a cartoon character. And Branagh doesn't want to let him do that because then that becomes joyful in its own way. He wants it to just be like stoic to the point of just of just no emotion, no demonstration. You can't even be angry, really, because that would be too much expression.
He's a
That's what I feel like he's doing.
melancholic. Yeah, I mean, Don John is a melancholic. He's has what too much black bile. I think that's
Yeah,
what they we
whatever it
would
is. Yeah.
say. So I don't know if that leads to that kind of rage. I think he has to be this like Iceman, right? But
But
it
he's
doesn't.
but he
But you're right. He is a cartoonish villain.
I just
Um,
think you can't, but I mean, this is the classic. Like as an actor, you can't do that. You can't play sad. You can't play I am going to be melancholic. Like that's what it feels, and that's why I think it feels so ungrounded because that's sort of what he was being told to do was he had to be melancholic. He had to be sad and be quiet and just not be exuberant. There's all these things that they're all being verbs, and you can't act that. None of those are things, and that's what it feels like happened here. This feels more like a directorial flaw because we've seen Keanu Reeves do this elsewhere, and it feels like that was what they wanted was the contrast of mood from the character, and so the character just falls completely flat on his face,
mhm.
right?
Yeah, yeah. I think that makes sense to me. I think that makes sense. Michael Keaton's dog. So I'm not the biggest fan of Dogberry, first of all. I just I get the
Again, I think
jokes.
that's what I would be cast as, so that's what I'm stuck with. But
Yeah, but it's I think it's one of the weaker comic characters. So Michael Keaton and the constable he works with, whose name I can't remember,
no idea.
he's converted into a female for the Joss Whedon version. They walk around on the horses in the same way
Not
that
in no, she isn't. She's not a female in the Joss Whedon version. It's male.
no Dogberry's male.
No, that's what I'm saying. Even the guy who's around with him
Oh,
is.
you're right. I'm sorry. I'm getting. Never mind. You're right. He is. That's Oh, I can't remember the name of the actor. Anyway, we'll get to the Joss Whedon
Yeah.
in a second. That was a mistake on my part. My apologies. But Michael Keaton and his assistant, they run around doing the horse galloping thing from Monty Python and the Holy Grail, and it makes no sense. I have no idea. So in Monty Python and the Holy Grail, it's a joke about filmmaking. And then they make another joke about it, which is where did you get the coconuts? And so it becomes a meta joke in a meta joke. That's the point of the horse thing. When Michael Keaton does it, it's not a joke on filmmaking. It's just look how stupid this guy is. But is he so stupid that he's going to pretend to ride a horse? What is he, 6 years old? I mean, it really doesn't like how bumbling does this guy have to be? It drove me crazy.
It just doesn't work.
It
Flat
doesn't
out
work.
doesn't work.
And he does a lot of they have him wear fake teeth that are very dirty and actually he wears them inconsistently. Sometimes they're in his mouth, sometimes they're not.
I never
And
noticed.
I did because I was like, what am I gonna watch here? Oh, his teeth are. Anyway, sometimes they're not there, and the the it's very muggy. He's mugging. It's
Yeah.
all over the place. It's jerky. It's yeah. It's a very very irritating version of Beetlejuice. That's I think what we're seeing here. That bothered me much much more than Keanu
Yeah.
Reeves's Don John.
And again, that's where I blame I blame Branagh on that. I blame the director because that's where an actor comes in with the actor should come in with choices, and a director should say that choice is not working. We need to change that choice. And I bet if someone had said that to Michael Keaton, he would have come back and said, "Okay, I can change this. I can do something different." And I don't think they did. It feels like, I've always heard the story with when they made Doctor Strangelove, they had told George C. Scott to just he wouldn't sort of act over the top the way that they wanted him to, and so he was essentially told just do completely insane as far as you can. We're just going to do them as test runs. And Kubrick had basically said, and I won't actually use those. So go as far over the top as you can. And that's what George C. Scott did. And then that's what they used. And apparently George C. Scott was really angry. But because that was what Kubrick wanted from him, and so he eventually got it out of him. This feels like a similar thing, where it was like, go as far over the top as you can, and he came out with something completely and utterly insane, and then they used it. It is why? It makes no sense.
Yeah.
It's a bad choice.
Yeah. So those are like the two weaknesses in it. I'd say I think everything else works.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah, everything else works. And it brings out a lot of things in the play. In a like, I know maybe I was critical of Denzel in it, but the scene where he asks Emma Thompson's Beatrice if you will have me,
Yes.
that's a really lovely scene. It's so
And it
sweet.
usually gets played as a joke, and I love that they treat it seriously.
Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, it works so well. And she rebuffs him so kindly, but without being condescending.
Yeah.
Like it's just I don't know how you write a character this well, you know. Like it is a that's a lovely lovely bit. Um, yeah, the whole movie works up and down, and yeah, I adored it. Shall we move into
Joss Whedon.
Joss Whedon? So Joss Whedon made this movie in his home, him and his wife's home, between ending the filming of the Avengers and editing the Avengers. He had arranged for, I think, a 2 week vacation that was in his contract for the Avengers. And instead of actually going on vacation, which is what I would have done, he decided to bring all of his friends over in his Shakespeare writing group. And many of them are in the Buffy universe. If you know Buffy Angel television shows, a lot of faces you'll recognize. He brought them over to his house and over 10 days filmed this movie and then wrote the soundtrack to it and had his brother record the soundtrack. So this is a labor of love in a lot of ways. It was well received when it came out. I saw it in theaters in Brooklyn when I was living in Brooklyn. I think in part because a lot of the people who went to see it were Buffy fans, and you had a lot of Buffy people in here. Also, the Beatrice and Benedict are played by a couple who also is a romantic lead in the television show Angel. So you got to see your Angel couple again come back together, and that probably explains a lot of the hype and the pleasure around it. I think there are good things about this movie. I think he is taking it in a different direction.
I think there are some things, which
Uh,
means I think there are many things that aren't good.
I think Amy Acker, who plays Beatrice, is works in it. Alexis Denisov, who plays her Benedict, I
Ugh.
struggled with. I'd say I'd struggle with him. I do think shout out to Clark Gregg, who played Leonato. I liked his Leonato. It's very different from the other Leonato. You did not?
He's fine. No, I have no problems
Uh,
with him.
yeah,
I wouldn't have called it out. I thought the Claudio was pretty good.
yeah, yeah,
I don't really like Claudio's a pretty pissy character, but
mm,
he was fine.
yeah. Fran Katz, who was you'll know him from Josh Whedon's movie, the Cabin in the Woods. He's the lead in that film, so that's the Joss Whedon product he was pulled from. But yeah, he's pretty good. Franz Gatz as Claudio is pretty good. Clark Gregg, who you'll know from the Avengers movies, I liked him a lot. His
Which
Leonardo
one's
is
he?
he's
Oh, he's
Leonardo.
Leonardo. He's
Yeah,
Leonardo. Sorry.
he's very different from Richard Pryor's Leonardo. Richard Pryor's Leonardo is kind of more avuncular. Clark Gregg's he's kind of a cool guy, like he's pouring people glasses of wine in the morning after the party, and he's got a like sexy suit on and all that kind of thing.
He was supposed to be played apparently by the dude from Buffy, the the dude who has the books.
Oh, wow. Oh, his name is
Giles?
yeah, Giles, but I can't remember the actor's
No
name.
idea who the actor is. Apparently, he was supposed to play Leonardo. That's the only thing I gleaned from my brief
Mhm.
checks on this movie was that it was supposed to be Giles.
Oh,
The
that's
only character I didn't really watch Buffy other than the few episodes you made me watch. And, and I watched even fewer of Angel other than the like two episodes you made me watch. So the only characters I really liked Giles in those
yeah.
movies, and
Anthony Head is the actor.
yeah, I really liked him in that TV show, and I like Sarah Michelle Gellar. I think she's fine. And I liked the one who's in the redhead who's in the How I Met Your Mother. I
Oh,
like her.
Allison Hannigan,
Allison Hannigan. I like her.
who is married to Alexis Denisov. She's actually married to the guy who played Benedict.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I like them. I liked their performances in that show. But that's the only things I really know about the show. So I know incredibly little. So I had no, and I don't think I've seen a Josh Whedon movie other than the Avengers. So I had very little emotional ties to any of these characters' relationships, which might have colored my boredom.
Yeah, I mean, so let's go with what he's going for that's different from what Bran is going for.
Yes.
Whedon is going for, and he's said this in interviews, and I think it's pretty clear in his movie, he's going for something a little darker.
Yeah.
Yeah, he sees something about society kind of structuring relationships. He has a lot of these characters in emotional scenes, especially in the wedding scene. He spends a lot of camera time looking at the crowd that's looking at Claudio and Hero. You see a lot of that kind of energy. And part of it is he wants to stage a party, and he does with, requisite jazz music and what have you. And trapeze
Yeah.
dancing
Yeah. There was like a Cirque du
sisters
Soleil. There's like a Cirque du Soleil kind
type
of thing
thing.
going on there. Yeah.
Yeah,
That
but
reminds me of like the dude when he goes to like some like the in Big Lebowski when he
oh,
goes to some of the like these parties and he's just kind of staring at something that's going on at the party.
yeah. And so there's that, but it seems like he's looking at the social atmosphere and blah 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 how it shapes us and blah blah
It had a
blah how
very
it,
Hollywood feel. Like I don't think most people have this have that sensation of being watched all the time. It had a very Hollywood preoccupation with how Hollywood thinks it's watched all the time and how that rather than what's really there in the play,
Mhm.
in my
Yeah,
opinion.
yeah, I think so. And it make having a house in having it filmed in a house in Beverly Hills,
Yeah.
owned by a famous Hollywood person has probably infused that a little bit.
What I thought was interesting about it was that in Branagh's version, and again, I love Branagh's version. I've seen it, I don't know, probably a dozen times. But when the film sort of switches and becomes kind of dark, it always feels a little bit false. Like there's always this weird, and, this is like the Romeo and Juliet kind of thing where you have to have the potential for tragedy. The potential for tragedy feels kind of false because the movie is so exorbitantly enthusiastically happy before that that this sort of shift to reading the epitaph and walking along with the candles to the tombs, it always kind of feels a little false. Like, come on, come on, come on, come on, come on. Like we can move on now. We got it. We got it. We're not. No one's watching it for this. It always has that a little bit of that feel to it. This had the opposite situation, which was in the beginning. I'm like, you seem so bored with all of whatever is supposed to be the love part of this story. And you seem, and I get it. It's supposed to be jaded. It's supposed to be all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, I already got it. We can move on. But it actually the parts that normally I don't like in the Branagh version worked much better in this one because that sense of that jaded sense was there, and it just feels that sort of ickiness is already there. And so when you get to these parts where it's supposed to be cruel and mean and harsh, it actually feels like it works. But then when you're supposed to get back at the end to the part, it just didn't. I thought, well, now I don't believe any of this. It
Mm,
just it doesn't. It felt like an attempt to make the text do something that's there but not meant to be emphasized. That the text doesn't want that. That's not the point that the text wants you to go down. You can, but it doesn't. It just felt slightly just false. It
mhm.
felt like an attempt to make the text do something the text didn't want to do.
Mhm.
Right?
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think so. I suppose I just don't find the material that dark, and so
Yeah, that's
that's
what I mean. You're
yeah,
trying to
that's your
make the
point.
text
Yeah,
do something that the text
that it
doesn't want to
isn't there
do.
for. Yeah.
And when the text tries to go down a dark, this is why, it's like Branagh tries to make it go down a sort of darker path. I think he should have just kind of you gloss over that. No one
Yeah,
cares about
you
it.
can
Move
get
on,
to
bro.
yeah.
We don't need to watch the dead poets guy cry. No one cares. Move on. That's
My
no one
neighbor,
cares. Yeah,
remember
your neighbor.
my
And
neighbor.
no one cares. Like move on. That's why I think that doesn't work because it's a plot device to make you
To
to
give
add some
stakes, yeah,
yeah,
they
to
need
raise some stakes
something.
and add some stuff to it, and then we're moving on from it. Whereas this wanted to just dwell in it, and I don't think you're meant to do that, and I don't think the text lets you do it.
And it's a little annoying to focus so much on the attention that people are giving to the hero Claudio thing. And I think it's further exacerbated by the fact that the most dynamic male within that group ends up being the guy who's playing Claudio. And so he was far more interesting to watch. And so I think as a viewer, you're kind of it comes off darker than maybe Whedon intended it because you're drawn into at least I was into Claudio's situation a lot more. I think
Yeah,
a lot more of Claudio's lines also survive, if we're thinking of adaptation. A lot more of Claudio's lines survive than than Benedict.
Benedict's. I mean, I didn't really care about Beatrice and Benedict. I liked the Beatrice; she's fine. Benedict's fine, but they get lost because you're not sort of waiting for their joyful
Coming
thing. You're
together, yeah.
waiting for all the foot to fall on like this, that weird snorkeling scene where he's
Mm.
like that felt like something like I'm trying to think what it felt like something out of a Kubrick movie. This just like guy sitting there with a snorkel on, which he can't even drink his drink because he has a snorkel on, and sitting there with his martini, and then suddenly the heads bob up around him. It was this like this feels like a very odd scene. Why is he here? Why is he staring off from the infinity pool? Like it was just weird. I'm like, it's very moody. It's very interesting scene, but it's not from the right movie.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, it's I just got the impression he was drunk, like this is a he's drunk until the next day. But it has a sort of expressionistic feel to it, right? It's very
Yeah.
dreamlike and and not a pleasant dream either. There's a sort of nightmarish feel to it that
No.
yeah, you're right, that doesn't seem to land in this movie.
I like Dogberry though. I mean, I know, and I thought he was funny. I thought that actually worked. I thought he was grounded and everything he said. It felt like this was a guy who wasn't trying to show me he was crazy. This was a guy who's trying to be very serious, and he doesn't use his words very well. And it just felt like I'm like, no, I actually totally believe this guy, and that felt very grounded, very real. I enjoyed it. I still kind of chuckled at it. It was
Mm.
good.
Yeah, and that's Nathan Fillion, who yeah, he's very fun, and I like the ensemble around him as well.
Yep.
They work off each other very well. That worked. And another thing that didn't work in the Brana version that worked in this, I think, is also Don John.
Yeah, he worked. Yeah.
Yeah, Don John, who is from Firefly fame, is
He gave a very good performance, actually. I thought totally believable. Got it, understood it, was grounded, was real.
yeah, Sean Mauer is his name. He was in Firefly, the Joss Whedon television show. And here, yeah, he's It is. He's great. And then they change his assistant into a female, so they're lovers is the idea. She
Well,
wasn't
I
very good.
think even the Branagh version, they're meant. I think the
Oh, that's the
suggestion is that
yeah,
they're
they're
lovers.
lovers.
That was
Yeah.
the suggestion I got. Even
Mm. Even
yes,
there.
it's two
Oh,
males, but yeah, I think that's the suggestion in the Branagh version. This one was just more
explicit.
explicit because they were just like, well, we're gonna make a woman have a makeout and basically almost have sex on camera. Um,
Yeah, and that she's played by the lead from that comedy duo.
I liked her.
Oh, really? I thought she struggled with the verse. She struggled
She
a
struggled with the
lot.
verse, but I kind of they all struggle with the verse. They're all terrible with the verse. This is the whole problem.
I don't think
They're
Amy
all
Acker is bad with the
no,
verse.
she's fine.
I think
Look,
Clark Gregg is good. I
he's
think
good,
Nathan
but
Fillion's
here's the
good with the
thing: a
verse.
lot of them struggle with the verse for what I was
He
saying
doesn't have
before. They're
verse, I should say, but
so many of them are just like they're almost monotone, and they again they can't they just lack a vocal range. Whereas maybe this is the guy who plays Claudio, because some of his scenes are just a little he tends to just go over the top. His that's that character. So his scenes he can go a little crazier. So he's allowed to get a little more vocal range into it. And maybe the women are just I feel like some of the women are better at because maybe they can use a little more of their vocal range on it. But so many of the men are just they sound like they're bored.
yeah,
Right?
yeah. I think that's true of yeah, I think that's true of the lead.
But I think it's true of so many of them. I just it drives me crazy because and maybe that's just the struggle is it's Shakespeare isn't natural. So
So
when you
don't be
try,
natural.
so don't be natural. Like you kind of have to go a little. You can't do that. You have to ladder your verse. You have to drag words out. That's how you have to ladder, you have to build, you have to go in ways you normally wouldn't. You drag out words and emphasize things you normally wouldn't emphasize. Like that's how it is meant to work. And so when you try to just do it as I am a man of few words, but I thank you. When you try to do that, it just sounds stupid.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I still struggled with her a lot. I mean, it sounded
Maybe I just tried to find something that I
well because I
enjoyed.
liked him so much. I liked
So
her,
maybe I
Sean
just liked
Maurer.
her because I
Must have
liked
liked him.
his
Yeah, Reflected
scenes.
Glory, and that's
Whatever was
yeah.
going on.
She's played. That's Ricky Lindholm, who's from the comedy duo. Oh God, Garfunkel and
Simon?
no, it's Garfunkel and Oates. That's what it's called.
I don't know it, but
I've only seen a few of it. My sister is a big fan of Garfunkel and Oates, but they're like two women who make music. Anyway, yeah. So that change is fine. Yeah, I liked him a lot, and I liked the music.
the music was good.
The music was good. And I do like Amy Acker.
Why is it in black and white? It felt claustrophobic.
Oh, did it?
I don't know. The way I was watching, I'm like, I feel like I'm just being like held back from this thing. It felt very it felt very contained. And again, it's in a house, so maybe that's part of it. But I felt very pushed back, and the black and white made me feel that way too. That the movie literally was like pushing me away from it, and it just a lot of the scenes just felt very flat, it felt flat, and I felt very pushed away. I didn't claustrophobic. It wasn't, and again, maybe that's the point. Maybe that was what they were going for. I didn't like it. That might have been intentional.
Yeah, it's not blocked well because we're just in his house. So in a lot of the scenes, it's people sitting around a table
Yeah.
or people walking through a hallway, and it's a nice house, but it feels like you're kind of walking through a small hallway in a house. It's not it's not very interesting to look at. I mean, it seems like a nice house, but
It seems like a fancy house.
yeah,
Yeah.
but it is. I think you're right. I think there isn't a lot of thought given to the compositions of it, except in certain scenes, like the pool scene where they're giving too much
Yeah.
thought to the
I thought,
composition.
gosh, that scene's creepy.
Yeah.
Like,
Mhm. To be fair, it should be creepy though, right? It's the prey, the
yeah,
villains sneaking up on the prey. But I see what you mean, where it's like this is out of a different
it's out of a
picture.
different movie. This
Yeah.
isn't the right movie. Um, and it's not that it's not there, but it's not you can't emphasize it. It's like, it's like the movies that you see, like I saw something online, it was like um the fake preview of Silence of the Lambs as if it was a romantic comedy. And it's like, and I'm like, yeah, I mean, all of those things are in the movie, and all of those scenes are in the movie, and some of those themes are even there. But that's not what you're meant to focus on. And then obviously, if you do, it becomes comic in that case. But when you do it here and you focus on all the evil intrigue aspects of it, it's there, but it's ultimately much ado about
Nothing.
nothing.
Yeah, yeah. The plot is the worst part of this because the plot he sets in motion is silly. We're not even sure how it quite works. Like, I think Branagh
I mean, the whole
stages
thing. I
it.
mean, Branagh at least stages it okay because the whole thing is when he even shows Margaret. Because my favorite thing is I'm like, Margaret could have just been like, "That was me," and then the whole thing is over. You're like,
Mhm.
"Oh crap, it was Margaret," and then everyone could just be like, "Oh shoot!" But instead, they show her being like scared and running away because it's obvious that she's done this, and so Branagh kind of, but it just. Yeah, the plot's the worst part of it. I don't care about that stupid hero Claudio story. Fine, maybe it is a second tier comedy. I still like her, but there's so many flaws in this that we're having to justify. But the thing is like the that plot is boring. I don't care, and it's so manufactured, and they have to manufacture the fake death thing, and it just it feels like a very manufactured plot line. And to emphasize that in this movie feels false.
It's a bad thing to emphasize. It's the thing not. It's the excuse to have all these people do something. The real reason to watch this is to watch Beatrice and Benedict fall in
Benedict.
love, and you don't
That's why you're
you
watching
don't
it.
care, right? And I think it's unfortunate because I really liked Amy Acker in this. I mean, it's hard because you saw her right after Emma Thompson, who's pretty
Yeah.
remarkable, and so she's not Emma Thompson. She doesn't have that capacity, but I think she gets the essential essence
She
of the
got it.
character. She handles it well. She's a good performer. She shows a lot of versatility. I liked her a lot in it, and she doesn't have somebody really to bounce off of. And Alexis Denisoff. I almost wished because he does a British accent on Angel and on Buffy. I almost wished he had the British accent back because he's a lot more expressive with the British accent. He's very very funny on those shows.
So my theory still works. I think the British accent is more versatile. Americans needs to welcome that back.
Yeah, or his Southern accent maybe competes with it a little
Southern
bit.
accent, well, Southern accent sort of is. I mean, it's a
Yeah, yeah. The British accent they were been using at
it's
the
a Scotch Irish.
time.
It's a Scotch Irish accent, really.
Yeah.
It's a Scotch Irish accent just dragged through 200 years.
So that would have been, yeah. So I think that's the versatile accent that would have worked. But
Well, then we got Branagh and we got all them, and
yeah,
they don't do that.
no, they don't. But they make it work. If you enjoyed Much Ado About Nothing, check out Franco Zeffirelli's 1967 production starring Maggie Smith and Robert Stevens, and Derek Jacobi as well. Smith and Stevens were another wife and husband couple who divorced after playing Beatrice and Benedict. This copy was thought lost until one was found in the Library of Congress in 2010. It had been loaned to the
Good job, America.
yeah, yeah, it had been loaned by the BBC to PBS and thought was lost, but they found it. You can rate and review this show anywhere fine podcasts are available. For those viewing in YouTube land, if you haven't already, please like this video, subscribe to the Talking Studios channel for all our exciting content, and follow us on social media at Talking Studios. Check out other shows by Talking Studios, including Talking Pictures Trivia, where we explore movies through trivia, Keep Making Movies, where we explore micro-budget films, Limited Lexicon, where we play through text-based adventure games, and Get the Point, where we slowly reveal a movie poster and try to guess which movie poster it is. Got a question for us? Call the Talking Studios hotline at 201
467 8679 and leave a message. It may be featured on a future episode. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to Adapt It, wherever fine podcasts are found.
Join us next time when we discuss Twelfth Night and the Trevor Nunn adaptation, as well as She's the Man.
Wow, Talking Studios.
Next week, we'll be discussing Twelfth Night. Pat, if you could play one role in this play, what would it be?
I think I should be Viola because,
Ah.
that's what, that I should not. No. You should have gone, no.
I was interested in the argument as to why.
Well, I mean, why I should play it is a different story. But, it actually could be. That's one of those ones where, who is it? Mark Rylance did the all male casting a few years ago. And I think he did Twelfth Night, actually. I didn't see his Twelfth
Yeah,
Night,
I did see his Twelfth Night.
I didn't see his Twelfth Night, but I saw his Richard. And it does kind of set it, your brain watches it differently. And so I think it actually could be kind of, this would be a fun one to see with an all male cast. Actually, I think you could really, it would open up new avenues. But no, I would be a very bad Viola. No, I should be Sir Toby Belch. I
Oh,
think
yes, that would be
I
fun.
don't think anybody's, I don't think there's any question on that one. I would be Sir Toby Belch, and I would love it.
Yeah, Sir Toby Belch. It's a fun role. He's not quite Falstaff. He's not that good,
He's
but
not that
it's
good,
a
but he's
fun.
just got some great lines. I said I can't remember. I'm going to paraphrase it, but it's the like, let's go drink some sack. It's too late to go to bed.
Yes.
That's just such a great line, and I've said variations of that when I used to live in New York City. Like it is way too late. We're not going to bed tonight. Just a minute. Like just move on. It's like that's such a great line. And I think it's the other one though who has the other great line, which is the just because you are virtuous, will there be no more cakes and ale? Like it's just such a great. Those characters are great. So I would be Sir Toby Belch. What about you, Tom?
I think I would be Duke Orsino. I think he is just I get the impression that he is sort of distant and but dumb enough. Like I think his
Yeah. He's good. I mean, not to say you're dumb, but
he's pretty dumb. Like his idea of, like, his opening speech, the opening speech of the play is ridiculous. It's completely insane and over the top. But he has these like moments of insight too, especially with Viola. And I think just in terms of age, in terms of physical appearance, yeah, I think I would be that person. I think I would be Orsino.
You'd be
Everybody,
Magic Mike
yeah,
in the She's the Man.
yes, I would be.
You could be Magic
Oh
Mike.
God, which one of us suggested she's the man?
Oh, I certainly didn't because I didn't even know it existed.
Oh, how did I suggest that?
It might have been KJ.
Might have been KJ. I think KJ, you owe us each a drink. That's what I'm going to say after watching this movie earlier today. But regardless, we will get into that next week. And then, audience, you could see if I could be Duke Orsino and Pat Sir Toby Belch.